I forced a smile, struggling to conceal the unease twisting in my gut. Lucian's wife, however, was far less amused. Her gaze was like icy daggers, each one piercing straight through me. I wanted to look away, but I held her stare, refusing to let her see how much she intimidated me. "Shall we?" Lucian's voice shattered the tense silence. He extended an arm toward the grand staircase that spiraled up to the upper floors. Without waiting for a response, he led the way, his wife following closely behind. My husband's grip on my waist tightened as we began to ascend the stairs. I could feel his tension, the way his body seemed coiled, ready to spring at a moment's notice. It did nothing to calm my nerves. At the top of the staircase, a pair of heavy, ornately carved doors loomed ahead. With a flourish, Lucian pushed them open, revealing a grand dining room beyond. The table was set for an elaborate meal, but the atmosphere was anything but welcoming. At the head of the table sat an older man, his presence commanding the room. His hair, streaked with silver, framed sharp features etched with age, but his eyes remained as piercing as ever. As we entered the room, his gaze flicked to me, his expression unreadable. "So, it's true. She is pregnant," he said, his voice deep and measured. I felt my husband's hand tense on my waist, his reply curt, almost biting. "As you can see, she is indeed pregnant." The old man's eyes shifted from me to my husband, and the air between them thickened with unspoken tension. I could feel it in the way the old man's gaze hardened, in the way my husband's hand tightened subtly on my waist. This was more than just a family dinner. It felt like the prelude to something far more sinister. My husband finally released me, stepping forward to pull out a chair at the table. His touch was gentler now, guiding me to sit. I lowered myself into the seat, my back straight and my heart still racing. My husband took the seat next to me, his presence solid and protective, yet the tension around him was evident. Lucian and his wife followed, taking their places at the table without a word. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the clinking of silverware and the soft rustle of fabric as everyone settled in. Moments later, the doors at the far end of the room opened, and a well-dressed chef entered, wheeling a cart laden with covered dishes. He moved with practiced precision, lifting each cover to reveal a series of meticulously prepared courses, richly scented soups, perfectly seared meats, and vibrant vegetables, all arranged with artistic flair. The chef began serving, moving around the table with a calm efficiency that seemed almost out of place in the tense atmosphere. Everyone began eating, starting with the hot soup that had been served first. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of what exactly it was, but as soon as the warm liquid touched my tongue, I found myself instantly hooked. The flavors were rich and comforting, a surprising contrast to the tense atmosphere around the table. Without realizing it, I had consumed the entire bowl in one go, savoring every last drop. As I set down the empty bowl, a sudden urge to ask for more surged within me. But when I looked up, I froze. Everyone was staring at me, their spoons untouched, their gazes heavy with scrutiny. The silence was deafening. Victor's voice sliced through the silence, his tone sharp and laced with sarcasm. "Do you starve your wife, Grayson?" Before my husband could respond, I spoke over him, my voice louder than I intended. Why would my husband starve me? The soup was just so good. I turned to my husband, realizing too late the mistake I had made. His jaw was clenched tight, a muscle ticking just beneath his skin. He had ordered me not to speak, and I had blatantly disobeyed him. I swallowed hard, the taste of fear replacing the lingering flavor of the soup. But the desire for more soup was stronger than my fear. I glanced at his untouched bowl, the warm steam still rising from it. "Do you mind?" I asked, my voice softer now, almost a whisper. "I want it so bad." His eyes bore into mine, a short, hard look that made my breath catch. But then, to my relief, his expression softened, and he tugged on a light smile. "Of course not, wife." I eagerly reached for his bowl, pulling it toward me with a quiet, "Thank you." As I began to eat, the chef approached to replace his soup. However, he waved him off. "I'm fine. I'll have a glass of wine instead." When the wine was poured, he took a slow sip, his gaze drifting away as the others finally turned their attention to their own bowls. But I couldn't help noticing Lucien's wife out of the corner of my eye, her expression bewildered as if she couldn't fathom my behaviour. Finishing the last spoonful, I let out a contented sigh and turned to the chef. "That was really good. Thank you." The chef merely nodded, his expression impassive as he cleared the empty bowls. He moved with swift precision, replacing them with the next course, a perfectly seared steak, its surface glistening under the soft lights. I picked up the cutlery and carefully sliced into the meat, only to find it half-cooked, the centre still raw. The sight of the red, barely warm flesh sent a wave of nausea rolling through me, the scent of blood sharp and metallic. I felt sick at the sight, the hunger that had driven me before now replaced by a queasy discomfort. I set my fork and knife down, my appetite suddenly vanishing. I swallowed hard, but the discomfort twisted in my stomach like a knot, and suddenly, all the soup I had eagerly consumed threatened to come back up. My husband's keen eyes flicked to me as he noticed my discomfort. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice cold but laced with a touch of concern. I swallowed hard, forcing down the nausea that was clawing its way up my throat. "I don't feel well," I whispered, my voice shaky. "I need to use the restroom." Before he could respond, Lucien chimed in, his tone almost too casual. "Is everything all right, sister-in-law? You didn't like the steak?" he asked. My husband's response was immediate and harsh, a low snarl that made me flinch. "She's fine," he snapped, his tone sharp enough to cut. Lucien looked taken aback, his mouth opening to retort, but before he could speak, the old man slammed his hand down onto the table with a hard thud. The sound was jarring, making everyone look up in alarm. "This dinner is over," he declared, his voice a deep rumble. "I need to talk to both of you." The old man's gaze swept to Lucien's wife, his expression cold and commanding. "Take her out with you. Now." The command was icy and absolute, leaving no room for argument. Lucien's wife hesitated only for a moment before nodding stiffly. She rose from her seat, her movements deliberate and controlled, and turned her cold gaze toward me, signalling me to follow her. Without another word, I followed her out of the dining room, the heavy doors closing behind us with a resounding thud that echoed through the silent corridor. I turned to Lucien's wife, desperation clear in my voice. "I need to use the bathroom urgently." She didn't say a word, but grabbed my arm with a vice-like grip. Without a hint of gentleness, she dragged me down the hallway. The force of her pull made me stumble, barely managing to keep my footing. She didn't slow down until we reached a guest restroom. With a swift, harsh shove, she pushed me inside, the abrupt motion nearly making me fall. I stumbled into the small, luxuriously decorated bathroom, catching myself on the edge of the sink. The shock of the rough treatment made the nausea subside somewhat, but I still felt the lingering after-effects. Before I could regain my composure, she was up on me. She grabbed my face with an iron grip, her fingers digging into my cheeks as she leaned in close. I barely had time to catch my breath before her iron grip tightened painfully around my face. Her eyes bore into mine with a ferocity that sent shivers down my spine. "Why did you come back?" she hissed, her voice a dangerous whisper. I was finally getting some peace, finally smiling, only for my husband to start calling your name over and over, even in his sleep. Confusion clouded my mind as I tried to make sense of her words. "What are you talking about?" Her nails dug deeper into my cheeks, causing a sharp sting that made my vision blur. I tried to pull away, but her hold was unyielding. She only tightened her hold, her fingers pressing into my flesh until I could feel the sharp sting of her nails. Her expression twisted into a bitter smile, a mirthless laugh escaping her lips. Do you think I didn't know you were sleeping with my husband?